and the person I spoke to at the time said Robert's gut is that the party under Kemi is not going to overtake Reform, therefore won't be the main party of the right. Doesn't mean it will die, but it will be an irrelevance for this electoral cycle. And I think what that means is that Jenrick has concluded if you can't beat them, you might as well join them.
Hello and welcome to Coffee House Shots. I'm James Heale and I'm joined today by Tim Shipman, the Spectator's political editor. Now Tim, it's been an incredible morning in Westminster, of course, because sensationally, Kemi Badenoch has sacked Robert Jenrick from the Shadow Cabinet, she's taken away the party whip from him and even cancelled his Conservative Party membership.
This morning, I removed the Conservative whip from Robert Jenrick after dismissing him from the Shadow Cabinet. I was very sorry to be presented with clear, irrefutable evidence, not just that he was preparing to defect, but he was planning to do so in the most damaging way possible to the Conservative Party and his Shadow Cabinet colleagues.
And this all comes because she accuses him of potentially going to defect to Reform, having been offered irrefutable evidence of that.
Yes, I mean, look, we talk about sensations in politics a lot, but I'm not sure at some level that people would be surprised by this, but they're certainly shocked that it's come in this way. Look, Conservative sources saying that, irrefutable proof is things that Robert Jenrick's team apparently left lying around. You say, is that digital messages? They say they've got more than that. Our understanding is that a hard copy of a potential resignation speech, at least a draft of one, was found, and that led Badenoch's team to believe that the defection was going to be what they call imminent. The expectation was either in a Sunday newspaper, a Sunday political programme, or at one of those now famous Reform press conferences first thing on a Monday morning, and Jenrick was going to appear, we believe. Reform sources saying, confirming that Jenrick and Farage met before Christmas, and also that there has been regular contact since. Farage has just been on the stage and has basically not denied the story and said that he's very surprised it's come out in this way. But anyone who's followed non-denial denials over the years knows that that is a basic confirmation that this was all on the cards. And the thing that appears to be in that speech that has upset Badenoch's team more than anything is that Jenrick appears to be criticising some of his Shadow Cabinet colleagues, and in her statement we had Badenoch essentially saying that he was planning to do this in the most damaging way possible. Jenrick himself, friends of Jenrick, not yet responding on the record, but there certainly haven't been any denials.
And I suppose why now is the key point. I mean, is it that sense that, maybe Robert Jenrick, who was fancied for a lot of last year, could have got the Conservative job? There were lots of people saying Kemi Badenoch wouldn't last. But after she's improved her performance, he perhaps has somewhat wilted in kind of the eyes of the Conservative electorate.
I think that's right. I mean, look, when Badenoch was doing badly at the start of last year, Jenrick, who is a very energetic character and would certainly have got out of bed every morning at 6 o'clock working out how he could try and defeat Labour, would have, I think, a lot of Tory MPs thought, be a blast of fresh air and a blast of energy. And, his social media work has shown that he's a decent campaigner. His speech at the party conference was decent, but not sort of wowing. The faithful liked it, but it didn't really cut through. Badenoch actually did a pretty decent conference speech, and I think that was the start of her turning things around. She's done much better at Prime Minister's questions. And actually, I would say a little bit of a role here for the Spectator in that we had our Parliamentarian of the Year awards in November, and Jenrick won the sort of Campaigner of the Year award, but gave a speech in which a lot of the jokes died on stage. And it's a big cross-party audience we have in there. There's a lot of Tories, a lot of donors, senior Labour people, people from the government, a lot of Reform people as well. And I think people watching that thought that James Cleverly, who was hosting the awards, did rather better from the sort of Tory point of view than Jenrick did. And there was a bit of a sort of sense that the Jenrick bubble had deflated at that point. I had a conversation shortly afterwards with someone who I should probably delicately say is very familiar with Robert Jenrick's thoughts. And I think after that, people were sort of saying, Badenoch's got till May, it's fine. But I think there is a strain of view, particularly amongst people who think reform has to be dealt with rather than defeated in the Conservative ranks, that time is running out for the Conservative Party. They're probably going to have a pretty torrid time in May, and that could functionally remove the Tories as a meaningful force in British politics. And I think having originally, I think, planned to take over the leadership of the Conservative Party and try and salvage it, and ultimately then maybe do a deal on more beneficial terms than they currently are with reform later in the Parliament. I think, assuming this story is correct, and I've no reason to think it isn't, that Jenrick has concluded that it would be better to jump into bed with reform now, make them the vessel of the right in this country, and go and try and take out the Labour Party. And the person I spoke to at the time said, Robert's gut is that the party under Kemi is not going to overtake reform, therefore won't be the main party of the right. Doesn't mean it will die, but it will be an irrelevance for this electoral cycle. And I think what that means is that Jenrick has concluded if you can't beat them, you might as well join them.
And of course, where does this leave Kemi Badenoch in all this? Because I've had one person in elected office, a Tory, rather admiring, say that it's quite an amazing move and it could be her Thatcher moment, the sort of standing up, making a big decision, big call, it's taken her by surprise. Where does this leave her? Does it strengthen her or weaken her?
I think it can only weaken her, really, but she's handled it about as well as you possibly could have done. I don't think she had any choice but to do what she did, and had she not done that, she would have looked like a passive victim in this situation. Look, there are people who think she's got better, but they still think that may not be enough, and anything that builds momentum for reform is bad news for the Conservative Party, because they are fishing largely in the same pond. I mean, both parties have, voters that will be seeking outside of that pond, but in terms of the sort of general right wing of this country, there's not room for both of them. And look, Badenoch has done this dynamically, surprisingly, done it with a degree of vim, and I think there will be people who will admire her personally for that, and it's hard not to. But does this existentially mean that the Conservative Party is in more trouble? I think it does, because losing Nadhim Zahawi and Robert Jenrick, that's arguably the two biggest sort of grabs that reform has made. Look, are they, it's not like getting a former Prime Minister or kind of showing that you've got one of the sort of all-time greats, but these guys are both serious sort of people who've spent time in the cabinet. Jenrick is, as we know, a decent campaigner, and I think he will be an energetic force. And I just go back again to that conversation I had with Nigel Farage for the Christmas edition, where we were sort of saying, well, when are you going to get your shadow cabinet? When's your shadow chancellor going to be announced? And he said, well, why would I make that decision now when I don't know what my full sort of bench is? And he's got two people in the last week who would be perfectly viable shadow chancellors. Bad news for Richard Tice. Zia Yousaf's probably wondering how many more big beasts there's room for at the top of this party. But bluntly, this is a coup for reform. They would have wanted to be the ones unveiling it, and they'll be quite miffed. There'll also be a sort of few question marks about, which idiot was it that left a speech lying around. That doesn't sort of suggest the kind of secrecy and organisation that you want when you're plotting something of this nature. My days at the Sunday Times, I helped sort of reveal the resignation of Amber Rudd from the cabinet, and I know what a secretive process that was, and how deeply couched in the number of people who knew. Was fewer than 5, and there were 3 of those were at the newspaper. So it was, I was locked in a separate room. We had an entirely fake newspaper that was constructed, this sort of loose lips sink ships, as they say, and in this case, a loose bit of paper appears to have been their undoing.
Well, at the current time of recording, it is 11:54, and in terms of loose lips, we have yet to hear anything from Robert Jenrick, but maybe we will see a big announcement from him later.
Well, I've invited him to join us on a podcast later this afternoon, so we'll see if he takes us up on that.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you for listening at home too.